Now for us, Joanne and myself, we've always known Tortula or Tortola as Tortola House, and in actual fact there is no Tortola House because there is only Tortula House. So Tortula is the house's name, and the reason for the name, it's not a name change, it's how it's actually pronounced, is the fact that William Wince's mother was born in Tortula. And here's a little bit of a geography map. So could anyone tell me where the circle is? Indonesia, West Indies, Jamaica. You're right, it is the West Indies. So where the island actually is Tortula, which is in the Virgin Islands. And it's a small island which is in the Virgin Islands. It was first settled by pirates, Blackbeard and Captain Kidd, and it was eventually a plantation for sugar, where there was lots of slaves. So Wince's mother was born in Tortula. She taught slaves and then moved to England. And once in England, she worked for the abolition movement with William Wilberforce, and that's her history behind her association with Tortula. So from now on, there is no Tortola House, it's Tortula House, and we know where it comes from. So if you want to go to the next one. And there we are. It's definitely collected to pirates. Now, with Brian's help, he did send me a lot of information. The house had been built in progressive sections. This was the house in about the 1870s. And if you look around the surrounding areas, it was actually quite a building which was isolated. And I would imagine when people in Gawler were coming in to look at it, it would have been a bit like the pyramid. It would have been this huge building in the middle of Gawler with really nothing around it, and we can see the shutters on the windows, the manicured gardens, and this is when William Wince was actually in the house. The house was described as a Venetian Gothic revival building with French Byzantine influences. The reason I put this one in is that there is a fence which is running along there, and we know that a later occupant built the cast iron fence in there, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now, this is the question for you, and you have the pictures in front of you. It was interesting that William Wince had a large family. He was one of the mayors of Gawler, a timber merchant, and very successful, and to be able to build a building like this in the 1870s, it really showed how wealthy he was. The question for you, as I did say a little bit earlier on, is how many people, including children, can you see within this photograph? The answer will be at the end, so you can mull over that. Now, the original land division of Gawler was in 1839, and Andrew Jones purchased the block, which is on the corner of Dundas and Todd Street, and he built the cottage. And if you know the property, you can see that it was just a 6-roomed house with a cellar, and he lived there until 1867. And then Wince bought the property in 1867, and in 1872 decided this wasn't quite big enough, I'm going to start building, which he did. And this is the whole incorporated building within it. So you still have the existing cottage on the left or at the top, and then the new building that he built in the front. And at the time he built it, so he actually took it from a 7-room building to a building that had 13 rooms. And you can see the progression within the size and scale of the property. Go to the next. And here's William Whipsey. When you have a look at Victorian photos, don't you love their beards? They had fantastic beards. We'll go to the next one. Now, Headley May is a bit like when you listen to the radio, they have a segue where you go from one topic to another. And the reason for having this is in there, this is a segue into the next owners of the house. And there's the cast iron fence, which is a good shot of it looking through onto the house. And here we have Alfred May. Now, Alfred May was one of the May brothers that lived in the house from that 1895 to 1911, and he was part of the industrialists within Gawler. And at the time, you can see the fashion changed. The beards are gone, now it's all moustaches. And so he's got quite good moustache. You can go back, yep, sorry, back again, yep. Yep, there you go. One more, and one more, yeah, and one more. Yeah, okay. The May brothers were industrialists in Gawler. They were the industrial powerhouse. Frederick lived in Sunnybray, and if you know Gawler very well, it's in Gawler West, and if you look over to it, next one, you can see the May family in front of Sunnybray. The reason I put this picture up is that both the brothers had the same cast iron fence, which was manufactured in Gawler. And you can see a picture of it there, and the next one. And there it is currently. And this is the piece of equipment that made their fame and money. They developed and invented this harvester, and then later went on to heavy engineering in the mining industries. But this is really the most significant part, how they actually made their money. Just the history of the houses as we're running through, and there is one mistake in there, and we'll just run through. So Andrew May, William Whipsey, Alfred May, and then the Methodist Church were looking for a property for their ministers. Alfred offered the property to the church, which they accepted for £1,000. And the church actually had it for almost 100 years. The mistake in this overhead is that it was 1995 that the Frosts bought the house, not 1985. The Frosts lived in it until 1902, and that's when Joan and I purchased the house. Now, I did say to someone the other day, it was an old-fashioned word, that we used to park outside the house and covet the house. And someone said, well, what does covet mean? And it means wanting something that somebody else owns. But we always liked the house, and it just come round that we were able to put ourselves in the position to purchase it. And I was saying to Bruce a bit earlier on, is we owned another house in Gawler. When you go into some houses, you know whether a house is a happy house or not. The previous property we owned definitely didn't have happy vibes about it, but the one thing with the Tortula, it is a happy house. We can see with this overhead here, this was in 1902, this is, 1975. This is when it was still within the church hands. The reason I put it up was, it was just to show when a house is in institutional hands, how some of the features do get lost along the way. So the property has lost its shutters, there is no appropriate fencing in the property, and it is starting to look a bit neglected. If you go to the next one. And we can see this is in 2015. The effort for us was bringing back the house but trying to keep it in an original condition. The benefit also with an institutional house is that structurally they're sound. When houses tend to be in private property or private hands, you find that each generation, as their health deteriorates, so does the house. But with Tortula, certainly the church had looked after the house. It was a strong fabric to the house. It just lost those peripheral things that give the house character. And for me, the biggest bonus was in one of the sheds, all the shutters were in place. Oh. So the shutters were all stored, not cut as firewood or seen as being old-fashioned. So it was an opportunity to reinstall the shutters, reinstall those features, and try and keep the house as original as what we could. Now, this one is to make sure nobody's dropped off to sleep. What do they call this?
The top of the roof.
There's a hand up at the back.
The widow's walk.
Right, and the second part of the question is, why do they call it a widow's walk?
Because the ladies were waiting to see if the ships were coming back with their husbands in board or not.
And that's entirely right. So that one's for you. I suppose that with the widow's walk, it's really an illustration of some features being lost off of the building. And for us, this will be one thing that we will try and reinstate. Obviously, it's quite a complex task because it's at the top of the building. I've incorporated this picture basically because, although it was taken in 1999, the interesting thing for us, really, there was two things to it, is that we've never been able to find a photograph of the rear of the building. So it's, how did they get up to the widow's walk? Because there's no internal stairway. From the literature we've researched, there was stairs that come externally up to the top of the widow's walk. Probably it would be too difficult to reinstate those, but it would be nice to just put the widow's walk up there as a structure. The other part of the question, which is really an open one for me, is on the cottage, why are those chimneys so tall? Because I don't know the answer.
They had to be extended because of the two-storey building alongside of it. Otherwise they wouldn't draw.
Okay.
So you can see where they really stepped up.
Yeah. So the answer is that to be able to get the draft, they have to be high enough. In my mind, I didn't know whether they were anticipating making that a part of a two-storey building. But we have to remember that the cottages were built first, and the two-storey part of the building was actually built a lot later. Yeah.
What year would it actually built, the two-storey bit?
Sorry?
Two-storey built was built in what year?
That was built in the 1870s. The question was, when was the two-storey section built? It was in the 1870s. Yeah. Whereas Jones had built his in the 1840s. The reason I'm putting this one up is just to give an idea of the, you could almost say a mishmash of architecture which is in there. Byzantine, Florentine, Revival, Gothic. Certainly, if you go through Melbourne, there are a lot of buildings with the tassel brickwork running through. The story goes that the cream bricks were allegedly from Florence and the red bricks were from Gawler. And the tassel brickwork in there, somebody that we were talking to who was in the bricklaying industry was, he called that a Norfolk pattern. So whether it was a traditional English pattern, I'm not quite sure. But certainly somebody would have been thinking about how they wanted this built, because a building like this doesn't get built without a lot of thought behind it. So the front facade is the cream and red brick, and the rest of the building is purely blue stone. Right, here's that question. How many people are in this photograph?
15.
They all know.
13. The man over there, sorry. Yeah, it's 13. It's not a... The interpretation of the picture, and I do apologise because the photocopying there's not... There is a lady which is standing on my left, and there is a small child standing in front of her, and that would make number 13.
Did you know there's a little boy at the front here as well?
On the balcony.
5'14" is just a boy there.
Is he the...
14. Okay.
You want to do that?
Okay. Now, what I thought I'd do, when we talked previously about the history of the property, I do want to go into a whole history about Windsea or the Maze or people's histories. This was really talking about the house, and the important thing for us is trying to keep the house in not an original state, but to keep those original features which are in the house, which sometimes are lost. The house has got lots of fireplaces, so what I really wanted to do was to look at the different types of fireplaces, and we'll gradually just go through those. So, reinstalling the bell pools. Now, normally, when there are servants in the house and there was a modernisation of houses, you would lose all those bell pools. Fortunately, we're able to find bell pools to replace them, particularly when you're talking about trying to get pairs of bell pools. In significant Victorian homes, there's going to be very large ornate rosettes, which is in the principal rooms, and the cornicing as well. The Carrara marble fireplace in the principal rooms, with their very fancy bell pools, and also a different type of rosette, but still quite significant. And then you come into the more basic rooms, the rooms that guests don't see, the wooden mantelpieces, and the less grand marbles. Again, bell pools, but a lot plainer. Rosettes, which start to become less ornate, but ornate cornicing. More standard type fireplaces, more standard basic bell pools, same fireplaces. And then when you get into the rooms that nobody sees, there is no cornicing. And this is the way the Victorians tended to decorate. You would only pay money for the areas that people saw. And then another fireplace, bell pool. And then just finally, because the house was built so early, this was really prior lead light. And so it would have been just a wooden lead light over the top of the building, over the top of the window. My presentation was fairly brief about that. I hope that captured your interest within it.
Paul, it is a pleasure to listen to your information relative to Tortula. It's been a feature of Gawler, which many people have commented upon through the years as being something out of the ordinary, and I appreciate the amount of history that you've delved into and brought to our notice tonight. Can I say that I had the pleasure of going into the building on 2 or 3 occasions in the time that the Reverend Broadbent, the Reverend Oliver and the Reverend Patrick were people associated with it for various community activities. And I well remember looking down the stairs at the train set. It was an interesting feature of the place. It's my pleasure on behalf of all present to say thank you to you and to ask you to accept this token of our appreciation. Thank you. I think it goes without saying that it is expected that your wife will get at least 50% of it. The same as Glennis Hatcher.
Fair enough.
I think it might be a bit more.